Ali was a new English language learner student in my morning ELD class. He was inquisitive, hard worker, and I thought he might be a potential candidate for my afternoon International Baccalaureate Theory of Knowledge class. I approached him about it, and he was intrigued, but he really didn't have a lot of confidence in his English proficiency. And he decided that he was going to stick with his existing class schedule. I asked him to think about it, but I didn't have a whole lot of hope that he was going to change his mind. A few days later, in my ELD class, I taught a lesson on growth mindset. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Carol Dweck's ideas about growth mindset. So a fair amount of people. Basically, the idea is looking at problems as opportunities, not as obstacles, and that we are not born with a fixed intelligence, that we can grow it through effort. At the end of my lesson, I asked students to write short reflections, and later that day, as I was reviewing what students had written, I saw that Ali's paper, he wrote, "I'm going to show that I have a growth mindset and take Mr. Ferlazzo's IB course." And I think that story illustrates why I think social emotional learning and the academic standards of Common Core do indeed go better together. But I think without SEL skills, it's like having the lyrics without the music. Sir Ken Robinson, who is a British author and speaker on education issues, has said that farmers and gardeners don't make their crops grow. They create the conditions in which they can grow. And I think the same thing can be said about social emotional learning, that it creates the conditions in which our students can engage with academic content and knowledge. But this idea isn't just coming out of my own head. It's actually an idea that's recommended by the authors of the Common Core standards themselves. The Council of Chief State School Officers, CSSO, one of the three authors of the Common Core, came out with a report and said that social emotional learning and the Common Core standards are mutually reinforcing. That is important. By teaching them both at the same time, students can learn both better. And the other authors of the Common Core standards agree. What they understand is what most of us understand here in the room, that it's unlikely that if students don't feel supported, they don't feel listened to, they don't feel motivated, it's unlikely they're going to want to engage in academic content. They've listed, the CSSO listed several what they call skills and dispositions of social emotional learning. And during this brief talk, I'm going to go over at least some of them and share some ways to reinforce it in the classroom. But I want to make it very clear, most of our students have tons of these skills already. And in many situations, have a lot more of it than most of us do. I've had students who have traveled from Central America on their own on tops of freight trains. They certainly have plenty of perseverance. Right? I've got students, as I'm sure many of you do too, who have to rush home every day after school to take care of younger siblings for several hours until parents arrive. They have plenty of self-control. And I have students who work the night shift every night to earn money to help support their whole family. Again, plenty of perseverance. I think the challenge to us is to help our students see how they can apply these skills and dispositions that they already have towards academic endeavors, and to create inviting classrooms where they feel like doing just that. I guess it's looking through our students through the lens of assets instead of deficits. So one of the skills that CCSSO highlights is goal setting, student goal setting. This is a part of a sheet I use in my English language learner students. And plenty of research shows that student goal setting, students setting their goals, not teachers setting the goals for students, enhances academic achievement. And one of the things that's important for us to keep in mind and to help our students understand is that researchers have identified the difference between learning goals and performance goals. A learning goal is, I want to read a book that has harder vocabulary. A performance goal is, I want to get an A in class. And these same researchers have found that people who focus on learning goals actually outperform those who focus on performance goals. So we can encourage our students to do both, but it's important to let them be aware of what the research says about learning goals. Metacognition is another SEL skill that CCSO emphasizes. Thinking about your thinking. Being aware of our strengths and when to apply them. Being aware of our weaknesses and how to compensate for them. I'm going to model a quick lesson about how I introduce the idea of metacognition to my students. I have a little prop. Hopefully it's behind here. Yes, a garbage can. They even put my name on my garbage can. So I knew I'd make it one of these days. So I write the word metacognition on the whiteboard as students come in. And as they come in, I remind them, I regularly brag to my students about my three-point shooting ability. I'm a regular basketball player, and I often come to school with various injuries attesting to that. So I tell students, I've decided today to demonstrate my basketball playing ability. Okay? So the garbage can is there. I tell them, well, watch this. Watch this. Throw it. I miss to the right. Students go wild, right? And you can imagine. Say, okay, calm down, calm down. Okay, so I see, okay, I threw the ball, I threw the paper overhand, and it moved to the right. Okay, maybe if I throw it underhand, I get more of an arc, and I move it a little to the left. Okay, so calm down, watch this. Okay, students go wild, obviously. Okay, so they're laughing. You can imagine what a group of high school students are doing after that happens. I calm down, calm down. Okay, so I tell them, okay, second time I threw this, it got a little closer. I think what I'm going to do is I just overcompensated. So now, guys, watch this. I go wild. Okay, so, and I explain to students that that is metacognition. Thinking about, reflecting on what you've done in the past, on what has worked and what hasn't worked, and applying it to do it better the next time. I ask students, well, what do you think would have happened if I just threw 3 balls quickly without thinking about what I had done previously? They say, well, Mr. Ferlazzo, it's unlikely you would have hit any of them. And I say, that's true. So after I do this lesson, we begin to make a list of what are metacognitive strategies that students can use in the classroom. Here are a few of them. One of the things I particularly like is learning journal. Many of us have had students do learning journals. Generally, it's what's the most interesting thing you've learned, the most important thing you've learned. What I do in this kind of learning journal is having students write down what has helped them or what hasn't helped them learn something. What strategy that they have used has worked or hasn't worked. Critical thinking is another strategy that CCSSO emphasizes that's important for students to learn so that they can better learn the academic knowledge of Common Core. Robert Marzano, who many of you are probably familiar with, education researcher, has written very favorably about a meta-analysis of assisted discovery learning oftentimes being more effective than direct instruction. And one strategy related to assisted discovery learning that I particularly like is called inductive teaching and learning. And inductive teaching is when students are given examples, and out of those examples have to identify the concept or rule that are exemplified by those examples. That contrasts with deductive teaching, is when you give students the concept and rule, then they work through examples to reinforce it. One of the strategies that we use a lot at Luther Burbank, and there are several teachers here from Luther Burbank who I'm sure would be happy to share more with you about how we use inductive teaching. They'll be leading the several EdCamp groups, is concept attainment, where there are two columns on the whiteboard or overhead. One says yes, one says no, and you have examples, bad examples under no, good examples under yes, and students have to identify out of that what are the qualities of the yes, what are the qualities of the no. You can have claims, good claims, bad claims. Examples of evidence. Why is this a good example of evidence? Why is this a bad example of evidence? Another strategy that I use in my English language learners that promotes critical thinking is based on the work of Paulo Freire, the South American educator known for critical pedagogy, where we show a picture or a video of a problem. Let's say a student being bullied at the playground, asking students, well, what is happening there? What is the problem? Have they experienced that problem? Have others they know experienced the problem? Why does the problem exist? What are potential solutions? What is the best solution and why? In my history classes, I promote critical thinking by doing what-if projects. What if George Washington had died at Valley Forge? Creative thinking, promoting creative thinking is another SEL skill promoted by CCSSO. Lots of ways to do that. One way is the constraints principle, also known as, believe it or not, the green eggs and ham hypothesis. That the story goes that the editor of Dr. Seuss challenged him to write a book only using 50 words. And the result is green eggs and ham. Lots of ways to use the constraints principle. Here are a few, having found poems. Had plenty of students who have to create Instagram videos of 12 seconds or less that communicate in complicated concepts. The random principle is another way to promote creative thinking, challenging students to connect seemingly disconnected elements. Certainly one way I've had students do that is giving a group of words and have them have to create metaphors or similes out of them. Agency is another CCSSO promoted SEL skill. Agency is feeling like you are in control of your life and recognizing that there are outside influences that can impact the amount of control you have, but nevertheless you can control your response to it. Many ways to promote student agency, ranging from self-talk. I don't know, any Golden State Warrior fans here? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, well, there's a great video on YouTube of Stephen Curry in a free throw shooting contest with his coach, Steve Kerr, and you hear him saying, control your destiny, control your destiny. In my own mind, I try to think I'm Stephen Curry. Unfortunately, most of the times the ball doesn't go in the hoop. Other ways to promote student agency is having students teach each other's. Jigsaw method is one. And then contributing to the community. I've had students who have organized job training fairs for their families in the greater school community, teaching other classes about the rights that they have if they are stopped by the police. So there are lots of different strategies to promote student agency. We've discussed a growth mindset, and oftentimes growth mindset and grit are discussed together, perseverance. One thing that's important, though, it's not just a matter of working harder. That's oftentimes how it's misinterpreted. And the researchers behind a growth mindset and grit will often say that the recipe for success is not just working harder, it's effort plus strategies plus help from others. That is what growth mindset and grit is about. You know, helping students develop SEL skills is not just a matter of teaching a class. You can teach, if you teach a class on a lesson on growth mindset and tell a student they're dumb, or even think that a student is dumb, it's not going to be very effective. That is something that needs to be reinforced day in and day out. And also, it's not a panacea. Some advocates of social emotional learning, most notably probably David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, they view SEL as a replacement for dealing with the economic and political policy changes that need to be done to deal with the problems facing our schools and our students' families and our communities, including racism. But it is a tool. I mean, we teachers need to remember that plenty of research shows that 30%, we only can impact 30% of the elements that affect our students' academic achievement. But SEL can be an effective tool. I was telling you about Ali at the beginning of this talk, and several weeks into the semester after he moved to my Theory of Knowledge class, he decided, oh, I like this kind of stuff. He transferred to all International Baccalaureate classes and is now a successful candidate for the International Baccalaureate diploma. So it's not a panacea, but it's a tool, and it can be a darn effective one. Thank you.